President's trade war with China could put American farmers in the middle of the fight.
And there are concerns for how the tariffs will threaten local soybean farmers.
This is big news. Looks like China is starting to crack under pressure.
China is running out of options.
You're going to have, in the next couple of weeks, 10 million workers who've lost their jobs, who don't get severance pay. Some of them haven't been paid for months.
China stands at a crossroads. That's how one Shanghai economist recently described the country's current economic moment. A mix of resilience, strain, and profound uncertainty. For decades, China's rise was powered by exports, especially to the United States. Now, with exports to America collapsing and domestic headwinds mounting, the growth model that once seemed unstoppable is facing its toughest test yet. This is not merely about trade numbers. It's about whether China can adapt its economy for a new era. The collapse in US-bound shipments is a shock, but the deeper story is the convergence of multiple challenges: a real estate slump, persistent deflation, and weakening domestic demand. Together, they are reshaping the foundations of China's growth and pushing the country toward a decisive tipping point. The most immediate headline is stark. In August 2025, China's shipments to the United States plunged 33.1% year-on-year, a collapse that stunned traders and policymakers alike. The numbers tell the story of a relationship unraveling under the weight of tariffs and political mistrust. And yet, the picture is nuanced. While exports to the US have plummeted, China has diverted trade flows to Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. This trade diversion has cushioned the blow, showing that the country's export machine remains adaptive, even under fire. Still, the return of the trade war under Donald Trump's second administration has left scars. Washington slapped 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. Beijing retaliated with 125% tariffs. And although a fragile truce was announced earlier this year, most analysts warn it is fading. Beyond trade, the most visible drag on growth is the property market. Once the crown jewel of China's economy, real estate and construction contributed an average of 16% to nominal GDP growth between 2017 and 2019. Today, they contribute almost nothing. The roots lie in Beijing's own three red lines debt policy, designed to curb risky borrowing by developers. The move succeeded in choking speculative excess, but also dried up financing and dampened homebuyer appetite. Empty apartments, stalled projects, and debt-laden developers now dominate headlines, a sobering contrast to the boom years. Adding to the gloom is deflation. Consumer prices have averaged only 0.2% year-on-year since 2023, compared to a global average of more than 4%. Falling prices might sound like a gift to households, but in reality, they signal weak demand and erode business confidence. For entrepreneurs, the fear is simple. If prices fall tomorrow, why invest today? Even household consumption, long touted as the engine of China's next phase of growth, has underwhelmed. Growth in disposable income and spending, which used to exceed 8% annually before the pandemic, has slowed to about 5% this year. At the same time, the household savings rate remains stubbornly high, around 32% of disposable income. Families prefer to save rather than spend, reflecting anxiety about the future. Taken together, these headwinds point to a broader challenge. China's economy is not only battling external shocks, but also wrestling with internal weaknesses that have been building for years. For decades, US-China economic interdependence shaped global prosperity. American economist Arthur Laffer once quipped, "Without China, there is no Walmart, and without Walmart, there is no middle-class and lower-class prosperity in the United States." That was the era when cheap Chinese goods fueled US consumption and Chinese factories boomed. But times have changed. By 2020, US final demand accounted for only about 3% of China's economy on a value-added basis. The relationship, once symbiotic, is now less central. The collapse in exports to the US still hurts, but it no longer defines China's fate. Some industries, however, are feeling the pinch more than others. Export-oriented manufacturers, particularly in electronics and consumer goods, are most exposed. While exports to the US make up only about 2% of revenues for Chinese manufacturing as a whole, the pain is concentrated in firms that depend on American buyers. The labor market is another concern. China's youth unemployment rate hit 16.9% in February 2025 for those aged 16 to 24. For young graduates, diminished export demand means fewer jobs in tech and manufacturing hubs, amplifying social pressures. Perhaps no sector illustrates the challenge better than semiconductors. Chips are the nexus of economic growth and national security. For China, the dilemma is balancing self-reliance with the reality of global supply chains. The US restrictions on chip exports and technology transfers have made this industry both a battleground and a bellwether for China's broader economic resilience. Chinese policymakers are not standing still. For 2025, the government has declared that stimulating domestic demand is the top economic priority. Monetary policy is set to remain moderately loose, with extraordinary countercyclical adjustments designed to spur lending and investment. Fiscal measures, including targeted infrastructure spending, are also on the table. Diversification remains another pillar of strategy. Exports to the US have already fallen as a share of total Chinese exports from 19% in 2019 to 15% in 2024. Ties with ASEAN, Africa, and Latin America are expanding, reducing reliance on any single market. Economists remain divided but pragmatic. George Magnus of the University of Oxford noted, "China could probably soldier on with continued stimulus, effective monetary policy, and exporting more via third countries. But the country continues to suffer from sluggish consumer spending." His words capture both the possibility of resilience and the weight of domestic constraints. Two scenarios now dominate the conversation. The optimistic scenario is that China pivots successfully toward a growth model powered by domestic consumption, green technologies, and high-value industries like semiconductors. This path could restore momentum and lessen the sting of US trade pressures. The pessimistic scenario is more sobering. External pressures combine with internal weaknesses, debt, deflation, demographics, to tip the economy into a more severe downturn, raising the risk of social instability. Either way, the global implications are profound. China's trajectory will ripple across supply chains, commodity markets, and financial systems worldwide. A slowdown in Beijing means weaker demand for everything from Brazilian soybeans to German machinery. Conversely, a successful Chinese pivot would redraw the map of global growth for the next decade. China's economy is not collapsing, but it is undeniably at a tipping point. The dramatic fall in exports to the US is more than a trade story. It is a catalyst exposing deeper vulnerabilities in property, consumption, and confidence. The message is clear. While Washington's tariffs and political hostility have accelerated the pressure, China's greatest challenge now lies within. Rebalancing toward domestic demand, high-tech innovation, and more sustainable growth will determine whether the country emerges stronger or struggles under the weight of its past model. As one Beijing scholar recently observed, every crisis is a mirror. The US export collapse shows us what we must change, not what we must fear. In this sense, the coming years will not only shape China's economy, they will shape China's place in the world.